I'm gonna be reviewing a few books here. Well, a couple anyway. Robin Cook's Toxin. There's a picture of him on the back. And Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. And I honestly, I don't like reading. I didn't care for either of these books that much. This one, I do like this format, the playaways, or what are they called? Yeah, playaways. I like that. But they got rid of them years ago from the library, and I bought them on book sale. I was very happy to get them because I actually like them. But they were having problems with them, and I remember they were loaning them out, and you'd get a battery in them, and I don't know why they supplied the battery in them. I mean, people can put their own batteries in. But, and it shows you how to change the battery in here. It's really not that complicated. But, like, what I do is, like, when flipping it opens to get the battery out, I just use this and go plunk, pop it out that way. But I guess people were having troubles with them. That's, like, when I told one of the librarians, I was like, oh, I really like these things. Why are you gonna, well, people have trouble. And I was like thinking, well, is it that the batteries are dead or almost dead when they get them, and they don't want to replace them themselves? Like, what's the trouble? I really couldn't understand, because I like the little things. But anyway, I should be reviewing the story, not the thing. But Midnight's Children. So I like the green and black poetic dream. I can't remember which track that was on. I tried to make note of it, and then I just didn't remember. I thought the story drags. It reads like an autobiographical sort of fiction piece, like a diary of sorts. I don't care for that. I started it when I was starting to consider seriously that I was actually talking to angels and that they were talking to me. And it's funny because in the story early on, the main character is talked to by archangels, and that was the point when I started to consider that the angel talk I was receiving was genuine and not electrically induced temporary insanity or something like that. Because initially I was thinking, well, it must be the power lines. They moved the power lines, and I'd heard something about
next to your house.
And I've read about people sometimes when they're influenced by electromagnetic fields, then they are more inclined to feel spirits around them and stuff like that, right? And at the time when I heard that, I thought, well, is it that the electromagnetic fields just give them this sense that is totally artificial, or do they actually give people who are more inclined to sense that sort of thing, do they kind of give them a boost so that they can sense it more strongly? I don't know. Like, I don't know either way. See, I'm a really open-minded person, so as much as my first hunch is always, the scientific side of things, like try to think through this rationally, you know, but then I'm open-minded and I consider other things. So anyway, but it could be the electrical lines. But
can I just interject?
Yes.
There is definite sound from the electrical lines.
Oh, I can hear. It's constant. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Inside Pauline's house, there'll be kind of like a buzzing.
Yeah.
And it's annoying. It's kind of like deep.
And you get some.
And you travel a few steps, and it disappears, or at least relative to what you've been in. And then there'll be another kind of like.
It didn't used to be like this. They moved the lines, and now it's. I have closer. This like. Sometimes I'll get like many different levels of humming at the same time. It's horrible. It's really awful.
It's incredible. No, I don't get any auras off of it or anything like that. I get annoyance off of it.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
I don't think it's healthy for a person.
No,
I think it's probably affecting my health. Like, probably all my cells are like, oh, this is horrible. And they're wanting to, like, apoptosis. It's triggering apoptosis of my cells. They're all committing suicide. Anyway.
It would be penetrating all the cells of your body.
Yeah. Every book I'd start to read provided answers to what I was thinking. In this story, the family and no one in the story treats him well, the main character. They certainly don't believe he has been contacted by angels, and eventually they determine he is genetically not their son. So a sort of disowning, really. Anyhow, I don't believe that a person could be scalped to permanent baldness by being lifted by their hair. But perhaps the point was just that the teacher was abusive. I don't care for Salman Rushdie as an author, but I don't think that authors should have to worry about death threats because they're boring. I have read the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie and listened to this one, and I can't see what he's written that warrants death threats, honestly.
Absolutely.
I mean, if anything, like, it makes me wonder, did he like put out the fatwa on himself because he wanted some more publicity? Because
he actually became famous with Midnight's Children, which I think preceded the Satanic Verses, but he became infamous.
Yeah.
And the reaction was amazing. There was a guy called something like Hugh Trevor Roper. Trevor Roper is one of those double-barreled English last names. I don't know about the first name. Kind of forgotten. But Trevor Roper said he should be taught a lesson. I wouldn't mind at all. They're talking about Salman Rushdie, not I told him. I wouldn't mind at all if I don't think he used the word gang, but he should have. He shouldn't have been saying I wouldn't mind if a group of offended Muslims got him in something like a back alley and taught him a lesson about. Taught him some manners and stuff. Can you believe that? There's an English historian.
Terrible.
I think he's the guy who wrote
I'm amazed that
stuff about Hitler, the Third Reich or stuff like that. Awful person. For saying that, he should have been facing charges.
Well, you really should.
That's hate speech when
people
you talk
can't
about
say
like
things
that.
like that.
No.
You know, especially when they know that the people who want to be teaching him a lesson.
It's funny
it's
because
a permanent lesson that they're wanting to teach him, so you can't really.
Shameful incitement to violence. Now, anyone who was endorsing that fatwa in England or anywhere else, frankly, but in England, any place where they've got hate speech, they should have been prosecuted for hate speech.
Yeah.
They should have been going into. Apparently, there was something like 30,000 people, maybe in Bradford or something like that.
Well, yeah, and
demonstrating
like
against
James
him.
and I were talking.
There should have been mass arrests and mass prosecutions for hate speech.
James and I were talking the other day about, maybe it was yesterday, about Morrissey and how he has he's been accused of hanging with skinheads and stuff like that, and it's like, what? If anything, like, I remember listening to the Smiths when I was a teenager and thinking, oh yeah, Morrissey, he's totally gay. But maybe not. Maybe I was just thinking that, you know. But I still can't see
skinheads thrilling to him.
That he would, yeah. And so I'm thinking at the time, well, maybe he's kind of bi or whatever. But still, I mean, if you're bi, if the rumors are true that he's hanging around skinheads, then what kind of people is he? Or if he's trying to hang around with skinheads rather than, like, who is he fearing then, you know, to warrant him hanging with that sort of people, which I don't believe he is hanging with skinheads at all.
Well, I think he's said positive things about the National Front. No, the National Front is portrayed as being Nazi or fascist. I don't know enough about it to make anything even bordering definitive on it. If they're just concerned about immigration, they are being misportrayed.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that he's maybe making a mistake.
Hanging with them?
Yeah. I mean, you'll get Sven Robinson, who was hanging around. So he was a member of the NDP party, probably still is, but he was an MP, I believe, a member of Parliament here. misrepresenting the NDP. Well, not really misrepresenting the people that they were supposed to be representing. And he'd be cavorting almost with Hamas and stuff like that. And someone once criticized him and said, hey, like if they'd had their druthers and figured they could get away with it, these flunkies from Hamas would have killed him. He says he was gay, openly gay.
Yeah, well, that's pretty foolish.
It's stupid.
But,
so you can get people who are that way, who hang with people that wouldn't be good for their health.
Yeah. But I don't know. I do remember I bought...
That having been said, I just want to say, I think Morrissey's way smarter than poor old Sven Robinson.
I was wanting to comment on that because I bought I don't know, maybe more than a decade ago, there were a lot of bands that were putting out Back to Mine albums, so they were like the music that the members of the bands liked listening to or whatever. They were putting out sort of mixtapes, for people to buy. And Morrissey put one out, and it was the best one. I think it was called Under the Influence. So good. And he did a big write-up inside, and wow, I had a totally renewed respect for Morrissey after reading what he had to say and listening to his mix. So, anyway, I'm going to go on to talk about Robin Cook's Toxin. Dr. Regis, main character in this, is such a jerk.
This is a novel,
This is a novel.
Written by a doctor, I guess, an MD,
yes.
Correct?
Sorry for He's dating his far younger receptionist, who he started seeing while married. He became jealous of his ex-wife's new significant other, who appears to be financially and powerfully more dominant, but Regis consoles himself by noticing the man is shorter and his hair's thinning. And Dr. Regis believes that his status as a doctor should permit him to hop the line in the ER for treatment for his daughter. He's aggressive, punches people, breaks mailboxes. He's a real piece of work. The book is well written, but quite boring, I found, until a certain point. It reads like something you'd expect an aggressive doctor to write. He writes what he knows. If you look at the picture on the back of the book, his arms are crossed, so that means he's closed to communication, and you can tell he's a real egomaniac, and that would be impossible to communicate with. He's wearing a red power tie with his hospital coat and stethoscopes strewn over his shoulder, and he has his little case file or whatever you call those things.
Does he? And I just... Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. But any smart doctor who cares about the welfare of his patients would not wear a tie. They're filthy and cut off blood flow to the brain somewhat.
Doctors should not wear ties. I ran across one study that indicated they carried germs, and I think this is one. It's not like a psychological study. It would be just let's see how many germs are on this tie. So
that'd be a great end to the story. Oh, it was your tie, doctor. It wasn't the... Anyway, I do like the onion ring. That was a cute little touch. That was the name of a restaurant here, which must refer to A&W, although the big E. coli thing that I heard about was Jack in the Box, and it was mentioned in this book later on anyway. I don't know why he had the part about downed cows and the rendering crew at the beginning. E. coli has nothing to do with downed cows. Is he trying to downplay the BSE problems in agriculture by combining it with E. coli? And no, he wasn't. Like later on in the book, he did mention the scare about BSE and how the system that we're using, when it really takes off here, it's gonna really take off because it's just the system is so bad. Yeah. The meat, big beef. Anyway, this guy.
I should emphasize when you say scare, you're not saying like lefties out there, fake lefties will talk about the Red Scare around the McCarthy area. No. You're talking about legitimate fear.
Yeah. The guy's published a lot of books, but I wouldn't want to read another by him. And that was what I felt before like page 100 or whatever. I suppose many people do like watching hospital dramas on TV. I never have been into those shows though. So that was part of it. And then page 102, there's a quote, I read in a journal last night that the United States, there's currently one administrator for every 1.5 doctors and nurses. So they were saying that that's partly why healthcare costs are so high.
Cut it out like a tumor.
Like, that's incredible. I didn't know that. That is a good point. Thank you, Dr. Robin Cook, for bringing that up, because that's important for people to realize that. If that's true. I mean, I have to look into it.
Yeah. That's in the United States.
I believe that, I believe when he's sticking in things like this about the medical system, I think he probably knows what he's talking about. But, I mean, it's a fiction book, and you got to look things up, right?
Yeah. A non-fiction book, you got to look at it more carefully.
Page 140 is an interesting read. Bacterial conjugation. The problem started, they think, late 70s in Argentina. Has spread quickly globally to 3% of the bovine intestines. I didn't know it was that bad. But that's gross. And scary. And then he has a quote later on, like, I'll read this at the beginning of the page. They're talking about the emergence of E. coli 0157H7. I believe E. coli 01H757 has come from the intense farming techniques that are in use today, Pauline said. The need for cheap protein to feed the animals has resulted in creative but disgusting solutions. Cows are fed rendered animals, including themselves. Even chicken manure is widely used. And
now, you already knew about this stuff before that.
The thing is that it's actually worse than that. It's worse than that. So, this book was put out in 1998. When I was studying horticulture, 95 to 97, then my roommate was a dairy farmer. Beautiful. She was her family was from Switzerland, and she should have been a model, not a dairy farmer. She was really tall and incredibly beautiful, like much more beautiful than Grace Kelly, like stunning. Anyway, but she'd tell me all sorts of things about the dairy industry and how frightening it was.
We're having something like a 3-alarm fire. Sorry about all the noise and sorry about the interruption.
Yeah, she'd talk about how the dairy cows, there were some farmers, like in Alberta, this was, I gave you the year already, but she said there were a lot of problems with it still, even though they'd made it illegal in Alberta for dairy farmers to feed their cattle their own manure. They were still doing it. So she said her family didn't do it, but she knew of families that were still doing it, and nothing was being done about it. And she was upset about it because she didn't think that they should be doing that, right? But yeah, it's revolting.
The best way to get around that is just don't eat meat. But
because like when you put up rules like that, well, what they do instead is they'll feed, say the chicken. They'll have a chicken barn with the straw on the floor or whatever, not much straw, and then it ends up with like mostly chicken poop and dead chickens and stuff like that. And
lots of dead chickens in the.
And then that ends up being fed to cows, and then the cow manure ends up being fed to pigs, and then so they just do this whole it's called nutrient recycling. You should look it up. It's actually really interesting.
What an innocuous title for it. Nutrient
oh my
recycling.
Gosh, yeah, it's really gross. So anyway, what was I going to say? The book started to get more interesting and less believable, though. As it went along, I started to realize that it made sense that the doctor was a control freak egomaniac, since that kind of doctor would be quite stressed out when if they couldn't cure their daughter. Like if they would want to feel like they were the big power men that could solve everything, right? So that actually fit. I like that he wrote that after a while, right? At first I was like, oh, I hate this doctor, and then it was like, yeah, but that's good that this is this character, right? I don't know that I'd believe that he'd be punching people out. Or collecting meat samples from a restaurant meat's freezer. I certainly can't see him going undercover to get evidence from a slaughterhouse, or the slaughterhouse owners killing a meat inspector. The story just became more and more ridiculous, and the doctor's personality changed after his daughter's death, which is not totally unbelievable, but I didn't believe how his personality changed. So I only enjoyed the story when the daughter died, and I didn't even enjoy it that much. Having said that, it's good that people like Robin Cook are shining a light on the meat industry. Big beef in America is scary. Also, I don't think Robin Cook may be the aggressive person that he appears to be. It is possible that the photographer or something like that, somebody in marketing said, oh, this is how you should look, like a doctor in a commercial. This is what people want to see, a power doctor. And so this might not be him at all. Yeah. So I should say that. And it's good that he has brought up some issues that people should look into. Now, I did want to mention that this is fiction. It's fiction. And he puts in here, there's a little blurb, this is fiction, anything that... But the thing is, like, this was given to me by a friend who's an artist type. And I thank her for giving me this book, and when she gave it to me, she said, I totally believe all of this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a fiction book, and I haven't read it this was like a long time ago, maybe 15 years ago she gave me this book. And I mean, she has worried me about things like that in the past. Like, she doesn't do research on her own, and you can't learn about the real world by reading fiction books. You can learn about things like, oh wow, I haven't looked into that, and then go look into some non-fiction books to learn about the real world. That's how you do it. You don't go, oh, I totally believe in all this, and then go along with whatever. No, you got to look it up for yourself.
It was very nice for this person.
Yes, it was very nice for her to give it to me, and I'm very thankful.
I mean, I've got relatives who believe the same way. Like fiction is about, it's the gospel truth. It really is, unless it's Wyndham Lewis and someone right wing. But it's the gospel truth, and this is where we go to find the real truth. The testimony of literature, as one of them has said. Testimony of literature. But
that having been said, I mean, Robin Cook does write very well. He's obviously very well educated. I mean, finished his postgraduate medical training at Harvard, so he's not a dumb bunny. So if you think, gee, I really hate reading about science stuff, but I want to learn a little bit, then I guess you could read stuff like this, and then maybe that could encourage you to actually read about real science stuff or something like that. Read some nonfiction stuff. If it gets your interest going. Maybe you're like, wow, that's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about the meat industry out there. It's nonfiction. It's really worth reading. But anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, I was going to talk about my friend, but I probably shouldn't, because that's kind of mean. All I was going to say, though, was I remember there was this one time, and I was telling her about, like, she was interested in what I was reading, and I was looking at herbal, traditional native remedies and stuff like that, and trying to find something, because I was just, trying to find things that might help James or something. Anyway,
with my cancer.
So I was looking through all of these things, and I was looking at the ingredients for Essiac, so that was one of the first things I came across, right? And she was, so I listed off like what they were and stuff while she was sitting there, and then all of a sudden, like, she started eating elm leaves off of the American elms, and because one of the ingredients is slippery elm, and so her lips and everything swelled up, and this year they were so this was public trees, like the city trees. She was just like picking elm leaves and eating them. And so I felt sort of bad because I felt kind of responsible because
You knew what they put on elm trees around.
Well, and it wasn't even the right species, and she didn't look up what it wasn't supposed to be the leaves. Like slippery elm, one of the ingredients is the bark. So you could like say you're pruning your branches, and it's like the inner bark part, not the outer bark. It's the inner. So what would that be? Probably, I don't know, xylem tissue or something. Anyway, but so here, the city at the time, they were injecting the trees with something to try to kill some sort of insect problem they had. And so her lips were all swollen out and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know.
She's
so this
lucky
is when
it just affected
yeah,
her lips, so who
like
knows what it did
I
to
don't
her
know
liver and
what
kidneys.
she was thinking. Like you really have to research things, and then when you're consuming things that are public property kind of stuff or whatever, you gotta wonder, well, what's been applied to it. And this goes even, you know, out in Crown land or something. You don't know. You just really have to look out for things, and you have to look out for yourself. And I felt bad because I had given her the ingredients of Essiac, and
People are responsible. I mean, if you give people information, they're responsible.
slippery
for the
elm is
way
not American elm, and it's anyway. Yeah.
I know who you're talking about
Yeah.
now, and she's aggressive propagandist, and she's a very aggressive propagandist, and she's a propagandist too. So I was thinking it was someone else. Yeah, she's. How much time do you think
Oh,
we've got?
sorry.
Because I've got 3 things to book review. A couple of minutes.
Oh no, yeah, only a couple minutes. So
Okay, so I'll
you missed-
introduce people to what
Okay.
I'm going to tell them. Take your gravel, okay, next little while. Scoundrel Time, Lillian Hellman, who came before the McCarthy, in the McCarthy era.
Mm-hmm.
Scoundrel Time, and she's talking about them, not herself and her husband, or her insignificant other, Dashiell Hammett. Then here are 2 books. The one in my left hand to your right is required reading if you want to yip yap jibber jabber about Islam. The Legacy of Jihad, Islamic Holy War, and the Fate of Non-Muslims in those holy wars. And then Sharia versus Freedom. They're written by and or compiled by a guy called Andrew Boscom. So it's interesting that Pauline was dealing with fatwa coming from Iran, because I'll be actually quoting from the Legacy of Jihad from Ayatollah. And this guy is I think something like a medical instructor at Harvard University. So you know, like we're staying with that theme. So next time I'll be quoting from the Ayatollah, and he'll be spitting on you intellectuals who say that Islam is a religion of peace, because he says that you are making it all up.